What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back, and as always, thank you for joining me. My name's Paul Brettel. I'm the site editor over at Dairyland Express, where we cover the Packers, Brewers, Bucks, and Badgers. Also have a new article out every Monday and Friday over at Cheesehead TV. And as it says at the bottom of the screen here, you can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. So here we are. It's March 23rd, and it is time to dive into my first mock draft for the Green Bay Packers. Now, I've put out a number of articles over at Dairyland Express diving into other mock drafts, giving my thoughts as well as how I think the Green Bay Packers would feel about each of those selections. But it's time to do my own. So in an article over at Dairyland Express this past weekend, I did a 3-round mock draft using the Draft Network's mock draft machine. And as we talked about in the last video, where I highlighted my 4 big things from the Davante Adams trade, with that newfound cap space, that $20 million that was created by trading Davante Adams, getting him off the books, his franchise tag off the books, as well as Green Bay now having 4 picks in the top 60, 5 in the first 3 rounds, and 7 in the first 4 rounds, they really have the opportunity to better round out this roster. Now, in all likelihood, the wide receiver position is going to be worse off this year, but hopefully with that extra cap space, those extra premium draft picks, you can elevate other positions, the interior defensive line, edge rusher, cornerback, tight end, safety, you name it. And while the receiver position may take a step back or maybe 2 steps back, hopefully you can elevate those other positions to help mitigate Davante Adams' absence. So the Packers have that opportunity to do so here in the draft. So let's dive in. So first up, pick 22. Had to do it. Had to go take a receiver, just given how big of a need it is right now. And currently on the rosters, Amari Rodgers, Allen Lazard, and Randall Cobb. Of the receivers, those 3 are the ones that we know are going to be on the roster come week 1. After that is Malik Taylor, Juwan Winfrey, Chris Blair, as well as Rico Gafford. So depth players in Winfrey and Taylor's case, perhaps special teams players. But they're going to be battling for roster spots. This receiver position is in desperate need. And as we look ahead to 2023, because after all, while we want to find impact players for the current year, the draft is also about planning ahead. And the outlook on the receiver position for the Green Bay Packers doesn't get any better next year. The only receiver currently under contract in 2023 is Amari Rodgers, who is still on his rookie deal. So with pick 22, I took Chris Olave, wide receiver from Ohio State. I know he's a popular pick and a favorite among Green Bay Packers fans, and I absolutely understand why and agree with it. He's someone who could step in and be that high volume target. Not to say that there isn't going to be bumps along the road or a learning curve for the rookie or trying to get on the same page with Aaron Rodgers. To some degree, odds are that's going to happen. But the way that Olave wins, he wins with his route running. He's considered by many draft experts the best route runner in this class. The Draft Network called him a true route tactician. And having that ability, that's someone who can step in from day one, win on the short routes, the intermediate routes, can win downfield. He also caught nearly 70% of his passes or his targets during his time at Ohio State. So the Packers need that impact player. They need someone who can come in and, right now be the guy. And I think Olave certainly has that potential, especially as the season progresses. So pick 22, I went with Chris Olave. Next up, a few picks later, pick 28. I went with George Karlaftis, edge rusher from Purdue. So I've talked about it on here before. Packers have Rashawn Gary. They have Preston Smith. Both of them finished the 2021 season, top 10 among all edge rushers and pressures generated. However, there was a real lack of impact plays when those two were not on the field. And edge rusher is a heavily rotated position. When Gary and Smith were both healthy, they both played roughly 68% of defensive snaps. So that means nearly a third of the Green Bay Packers defensive snaps were played without one of them or both of them on the field. So edge rusher is a premier position. The name of the game is getting after the quarterback. And it's also one that's heavily rotated. So having strong depth is important as well. Now, the Packers will be getting back Randy Ramsey. He got hurt last summer, missed the entire season. Again, hopefully young players like Jonathan Garvin, a former 7th-round pick, Tipa Nailai, a former undrafted rookie, can continue to progress, but Green Bay needs to be aggressive in addressing that need because there is the possibility that they don't take those steps forward. They're young players. They have the potential. We see the ceilings that they have, but they're also a 7th-round pick in a UDFA, and relying heavily on them to be your 3rd or 4th edge rusher, that can come with some risks. So I think the Green Bay Packers need to be proactive just because edge rusher is such a premier position in football, perhaps it is one of the most important positions in the game, that they need to go out and find that third edge rusher who they can pair with Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith. And I love Karlaftis. At this position, pick 28. This does feel like a steal getting him at this point, but between the 2019-2021 season, so excluding 2020, he saw minimal time on the field in 2020, but he totaled 109 pressures during those two seasons, including 13 sacks. He's stout against the run, and he's someone that the Green Bay Packers could move inside on pass rushing down, similar to what they do with Rashawn Gary. What they did was Zadarius Smith, and the real benefit for Karlaftis is because you have Gary, because you have Preston Smith, he doesn't have to step in and be the guy right away. Green Bay can actually take a similar approach to him with what they did with Gary, where you lean on your star power. Karlaftis fills in as a strong rotational piece, but has the opportunity to develop. So I really like this selection here. He's someone who can come in and help make an impact right away. He can help upgrade the depth of the position. You have someone who can, be a part of your core for the next, the coming 4 years, 5 years, even with that fifth-year rookie option, and hopefully beyond if he gets a second contract. But he doesn't have to be the guy right away. So I think that's a good position for any rookie to step into. Next up, pick 53, Travis Jones, interior defensive lineman from Uconn. Now the Green Bay Packers have signed Jerome Reid on Tuesday. And while that was certainly needed, that doesn't change how I view the interior defensive line position. If I was doing this mock draft after that signing had been made, I would still draft one early on. Even with Jerome Reid, there's still only 5 interior defensive linemen on the roster. It's Reid, Kenny Clark, Dean Lowry, TJ Slayton, and Jack Heflin. Again, we hope Slayton can take on a much larger role. We hope he can take a step forward. Same for Jack Heflin. But again, you're relying on second-year players, a second-year fifth-rounder, a second-year undrafted rookie to play a heavy dose of meaningful snaps. Not to say that they can't, but again, there's just risk involved with relying heavily on those players. So you have Jerome Reid who can help, he's going to step in right away. He's played over 800 snaps in 3 of the last 4 seasons. So he's going to step in right away and be a big part of this defense. But as we look ahead to future years, the depth of this unit is still a concern. Jack Heflin is not guaranteed to be on this roster. Dean Lowry's in the final year of his deal. Reid signed a 1-year contract. So again, we need to plan ahead as well, but this is also a position where the depth can still be bolstered for 2022 as well, even with the signing of Reid. So I really, really like Travis Jones and where he fits in this Green Bay Packers defense. He's, from his time at Uconn, he's going to be known more for his run stuffing ability, playing as a 0-tech, 1-tech, or a nose tackle is where he primarily aligned. But he has upside as a pass rusher as well. He tested incredibly well at the combine. I think his relative athletic score after those testings was 9.5 out of 10 or somewhere in that ballpark. It was among the elite of all interior defensive linemen. And on top of that, he has 48 pressures generated between the 2019 and 2021 seasons. He would opt out of 2020. So again, you see that upside potential as a pass rusher, but early on, he's probably primarily going to be a run defender and a run stuffer on those early downs. But when you have that person in the middle, it gives this defense so much, and Joe Barry so much added flexibility when you have that presence. He's likely not going to stuff the stat sheet. His job is to do the dirty work, eat up double teams, occupy space. And with that, that keeps the linebackers clean. That frees up the edge rushers. You now have the added flexibility to move Kenny Clark around more for matchups that favor him, one-on-one opportunities. And of course, Kenny Clark in one-on-one opportunities is always a good thing. Now you throw in Dean Lowry, who's coming off a career year as a pass rusher. You have Jerome Reid. TJ Slayton can be mixed in as well, along with Jones, filling a similar role as a rotational piece in the middle. And this interior defensive line, which has certainly been one of the weaker points of this Packers team in recent years, all of a sudden starts to look pretty good. So I have Travis Jones at pick 53. Next up is Isaiah Likely from Coastal Carolina. That's who I select with pick 59. Now, again, this mock draft was done before the Packers had agreed to terms with Robert Tonyan. And before that, one of the biggest needs that this team had to address was finding a true pass-catching tight end for this offense. They have Josiah DeGuara, they have Mercedes Lewis, Tyler Davis, Dominic Daphne, but each of those players, their bread and butter is more so as blockers. Doesn't mean they can't be effective in the passing game, but none of those players are asked to do what Robert Tonyan was asked to do. And we saw last year when Tonyan was injured that this offense really missed that element over the middle, down the seam, in the red zone. And it's certainly not a coincidence that when we look at when this offense was really firing on all cylinders towards the end of the season, week 12, 13, 14, 15, that's when they were getting their most production from Mercedes Lewis and Josiah DeGuara in the passing game. So again, having that element is incredibly important. Now, again, this mock draft was done before the Tonyan selection. That would not change where I would draft likely or how I would address the tight end position. As we look ahead to next year, Tunyan's only here on a 1-year deal. Josiah DeGuara is the only player under contract for 2023 at the tight end position. So as we look ahead, again, it's another big need that the Packers have to address. And in terms of finding that pass catching element at the tight end position, look no further than Isaiah Likely. He was a playmaker for Coastal Carolina, lined up in line, in the slot, in the backfield, out wide as well, averaged over 15 yards per catch as a tight end over his career, caught 72% of his 169 targets, and he was one of the best tight ends in football in picking up yards after the catch. His blocking has improved each year that he's been in college, and we know that's an important element even for Robert Tonyan on the Packers, who's more of a pass catcher. But don't be mistaken. When Isaiah Likely's in the game, he's there as a weapon, and this offense could certainly use more of that right now as well. So I really, really like Isaiah Likely and what he would bring to this Green Bay Packers offense. All right, last selection in my 3-round mock draft. Pick 92, I went with Alec Pierce, wide receiver from Cincinnati. So if we look at the Packers roster, we have Randall Cobb, Amari Rodgers. Those are going to be your slot players. Amari Rodgers can fill that gadget role. You have Al Lazard, who can do, he can line up anywhere, known for his run blocking ability. And then we have Chris Olave, who we just selected, someone who can be the high volume target, can win in all three phases of the field. So what we're missing right now is that deep threat, that presence that Marquez Valdez-Scantling brings, and perhaps the Green Bay Packers still go out and sign him in free agency. But we need that element. I know I've talked about it on here before, but in addition to just having that shot play ability downfield, which is important for sure. We know that's an important part of LaFleur's offense. We know Aaron Rodgers wants to take those shots, but when the defense respects that element, it opens up the passing game greatly, creates better spacing, creates opportunities for the other pass catching targets. I know I go back to that 49ers game in the playoffs, but not having MVS available certainly had an impact in that regard. If you go back and rewatch the 49ers, they did not appear too concerned about getting beat over the top by those other Packers receivers. And with that, they played closer to the line of scrimmage. The field was condensed. It was more difficult to move the ball through the air. So finding that element, whether it's MVS, whether it's Alec Pierce, whether it's another draft pick, 100% has to be on the Green Bay Packers to-do list this offseason still. So I went with Alec Pierce to help fill that role. He was the go-to downfield shot play option in that Cincinnati offense, averaged over 17 yards, or averaged exactly 17 yards per catch over his career. 17 yards was his average depth of target as well. But he's not just strictly a deep threat as well. He can bring that added ability of underneath routes, the intermediate routes. In 2021, 28 of his 74 targets were within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. So you're getting someone who's more well-versed in his game, is not strictly just that deep ball capacity, but he certainly has that element and proved at Cincinnati that he can win on those types of routes. And again, that's a must-have element for this Green Bay Packers offense. So there you have it. Those are my 5 picks for the Green Bay Packers 3 rounds. And before we wrap up, I have a few final thoughts that I also added at the end of this article. So full disclosure, when I went through this article, the Packers had not re-signed Rasul Douglas at that point. However, I operated under the assumption that they were going to. The reports, especially after Devontae Adams was traded, all greatly suggested that was the possibility. So had Douglas not been signed, cornerback would have been on my radar, and it still was to a certain degree. They have Jair, they have Stokes, and Rasul Douglas, but if they could add a true slot option to that secondary, it's going to give them so much more flexibility. Right now, I think many of us are assuming that role is going to belong to Jair Alexander, although it's going to be some shared duties as well. We'll probably see Savage there, Amos there on occasion as well. Packers also have Shamar John Charles on the roster, who they drafted last year in the 5th round, I believe, as a option in the slot. But if you have a true slot option, now all of a sudden maybe you have Stokes and Jair on the boundary, and Rasul Douglas is your third safety on the field, roam in the middle. It just gives you that added flexibility. So if the right player is there, within those first 3 rounds, I'm still not going to be surprised at all to see Green Bay address the cornerback position. 2 positions I did certainly have my eyes on through all of this was safety as well as offensive tackle. However, given how the board fell, who was available at those positions, who was available at the other positions, it didn't work out. Safety, it's an under the radar need. They have Savage, they have Amos, but both are currently in the final years of their contracts. Hopefully they extend Amos. Darnell Savage could still have his 5th-year option picked up. I believe the deadline for that is early May. But after them on the roster, there's 3 other players: Vernon Scott, Ennis Gaines, and Sean Davis. Combined, they have 90 career defensive snaps. All of those belong to Vernon Scott. So the third safety, while we don't see nearly as much dime from the Green Bay Packers under Barry as we did Mike Pettin, Henry Black was still on the field for about 300 snaps last year. So that's a role they have to fill. You want to build up that depth you want to raise that level of depth, I should say. But also looking ahead to next year, we don't have any guarantee that Amos and Savage are going to be on the roster. So safety is certainly need. Offensive tackle, we don't know when Elton Jenkins is going to be back. Presumably Yash is going to move over from left to right tackle. But again, it's one of the most important positions in football. And if you can build up that depth, you should certainly take that opportunity. So heading into the 4th round, had I gone that far in this mock draft, safety and offensive tackle, again, we don't want to force anything, but those are 2 positions that certainly would have been on my radar. Overall, I was very happy with how this turned out. I felt that I was able to knock out the biggest needs that the Green Bay Packers had, and with each of those picks, we're going to have some day one contributors for this Green Bay Packers team that has Super Bowl aspirations. So there you have it. There's my mock draft, my thoughts on each selection, as well as just some final thoughts on how it turned out, as well as other positions I had my eyes on. So again, you can find this article at Dairyland Express, where you can find all my work, as well as Cheesehead TV. Follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. Please, if you enjoyed the video, hit like, hit subscribe. I do greatly appreciate it. So until next time, friends, we'll be back in a few days. Take care, stay safe, and as always, go Pack, go.